Hi, welcome to the Small Shed. This week I want to look at lone working. See you in a minute. Now, in the list of 10 things that I've been doing over the last few months, and I've got more of in the future, wanted to take a look at lone working. Now, that's not just essentially people who are self-employed out and about, although some of these things apply to them and some of them apply to them more than to individuals. But just as a person going out and doing stuff, I thought the other day I was out doing that Land Rover build pretty much most of the day on my own. Although I was in the middle of a crowded built up area, I was in an area that nobody was going to be there for probably 2 or 3 hours, maybe even longer. And there have been other occasions I go down to Menin Sheds and do work down there. Now, we have a fairly strict rule down there that you don't have one person on their own down there, but it's the sort of thing you can do. You pop round to do a little job for a friend in their back garden, nobody about, or you go and do a job for somebody as a professional job. And if there's no one around, you are at risk. And it's not anything that's a massive problem that you need to get too uptight about. There's a few fairly sensible precautions, but I will spend most of the time in the video explaining the situation I got myself into about 15 years ago, which was all totally avoidable and got me into a situation not of peril particularly. You'll enjoy it because you like seeing me fall off ladders and climbing up roofs and things. I will vaguely mock up what was happening on the outside of my shed here. But it got me into a situation in an instant like that I couldn't get out of. And it's just worth thinking about some of these things so that you don't get in the same situation effectively. So let's just start off with the first one. Now, if you're going to go and work in someone else's house and there's nobody about much, or there's no adult present, one of the things I found when I was working for Aviva, that they wouldn't let us go into a property if there was a minor there. That's something that's got to be fairly careful about, because you leave yourself open to all sorts of problems in the future if somebody says something about the man that was there and you were on your own with a child or a young girl or something like that. So that's one to think about. Similarly, while you're in the property, you're open, if it's not your house or that of a friend, you're open to accusations of theft or damage. You can sort of avoid some of that by either wearing a GoPro type body cam or taking a picture of the room before you start. But again, I think the general consensus is just not to get into that situation. So something to think about on that one. So that brings us on to that second point. Can you avoid doing it anyway? And if possible, I think the answer should be yes. If you can take somebody along with you as a witness or a helper, or wait until somebody else is there rather than say, oh, I'll go and do it while you're not there, you're keeping yourself out of a potential problem in the future and you're not putting yourself at risk overall. One of the things I've found in the past, it's not a big deal, but it's something to think about, and it's just general advice anyway. If you're out and about on your own, keep an eye on what the weather's doing. I have been over at our railway club in Leamington, which is in the middle of nowhere, and come out one night, last man out, 4-foot snowdrifts down country lanes. And you know, if you're stuck like that, you've got no warm clothing or anything like that, you only need to break down or come off the road and you can find yourself in a whole heap of trouble on that sort of thing. That's general, that's nothing to do with going in doing jobs. That's just a general out and about type thing to think about. It may seem stupid, but it's worth knowing where you're actually going to be. And and you'll see when I talk about the job that I went to and got myself into trouble with, it's very easy nowadays to just get a postcode, pop it in a sat nav and go off there. And if a couple of hours later somebody asks you where you are, you probably haven't got a clue. You might have had an address as such, or it might be somewhere where there isn't specifically an address you can get because it's a university campus or something like that. But it's just worth knowing exactly where you are rather than just having, or at least have the postcode with you. Because if you're trying to ring somebody up and tell them that you've come out on a job and you put it in the sat nav in the car but you can't get at the car, it's not really much use to you. I know nowadays they can track phones and that's probably the answer to most things, but again, it's just worth remembering sometimes you do things almost by rote. You just bang something in a sat nav and you go there, but you don't actually know where you've been, where you've travelled, what road you're on or anything. It's worth knowing who you're going to see, and that's not just jobs, that's if you're going to buy and sell something or anything like that. Are you going to meet somebody who's asked you to go and meet them up the services on the M5 or something because they want your van full of tools rather than to meet you and buy something, or whip your car, whatever? It's just worth getting a rough idea on where the people are that you're meeting, you know, who they are and where they've come from and what you know about them before you start going out. Security, keep your car locked more or less wherever you are. The amount of people I know, both in the trade and private individuals, who will go park the van, go and do some work, come back and they've left the back door open and half the stuff's gone, and that's in a matter of seconds. People are watching all the while, people are there all the while. So it's very important just to make sure that every time you leave your car you lock it, because you could bet your life when you come back half your stuff will be gone otherwise. Have a first aid kit with you. That's something I've always got in the car anyway, but if you've got it close by or in the car with you, or if you're out and about, if you've been somewhere, if you can take something with you by way of a small emergency sort of kit along with your tools, it's useful just to have with you. Even if you just have a cut finger, if you've got blood everywhere, I know I normally just stick a bit of masking tape and sellotape or kitchen roll around it, but really it's no real substitute for getting some decent plasters and bandages. I think it's important, particularly those of us who are older, that if you are going out to do anything like that, you tell somebody where you're going, and more importantly when you're expected back. And that again will be something that repeats when I tell you about my little escapades. Most important, and probably the number one thing I would suggest, is taking a mobile phone with you. In this day and age, pretty much everybody's got one. Make sure you've got coverage and make sure you've got a charged battery. The coverage is a difficult one because if you're in the middle of Wales and you're going to do something and there's no coverage, it's not really much use, but you can at least get to where you realise you're losing a signal or you've lost a signal, go back a bit, ring someone up, say I'm just going off to do so and so, I'll be back in 2 hours. If not, get someone to pop and have a look and see where I am, that sort of thing. It's always wise to just keep that dialogue so that people are expecting when you'll ring back and when you'll be back, and tell people where you are and when you're going to come back. Mobile phones, as I say, are ideal for it, but they're no use to you if they're not with you at all times. And again, you'll see in a minute why I say that. And similarly, if the battery's flat, it's not a lot of use to you either. So there we are, a few things to think about. They're not designed to scare you into panicking about not doing things, but it's common sense. Just think about what you're doing, where you're going, take a phone with you and let people know where you're going. So go back 15 years, about this time of year, it was the summer bank holiday. We were coming up to the summer bank holiday weekend. I was over in Leicester working, and we had a job to go that I'd got to go and look at, which was a burnt out scout hut, and it was up in Loughborough. So the Friday afternoon before the bank holiday, I thought, yeah, summer, nice summer's day, I'll pop up and do that job. Time I've finished, I can get straight on the motorway down the M1, get across home, and I'll get a relatively early, trip home. It still means that I'd probably have been away about 5 o'clock, but even so, it usually was half 6 when I got away from Leicester from the office. So I packed all my stuff up, said to the folks in the office, just popping out to look at a little job, I'm not likely to be back, I've got my phone with me, ring me if you need anything, see you on Tuesday. Said the same to the receptionist, and off I went. Now, when I got to the job, it was a large prefabricated hut, a bit like the shed here, only probably 7 or 8 times bigger. So this job was in the middle of a university complex, University of Loughborough complex somewhere. I'd put it in the sat nav, like I mentioned, driven up there, found it, got out of the car, summer's day. The place had been boarded up. It was 2 foot-ish, 600 mil off the ground on like bricks, with some steps at the front, and there was an 8x4 sheet of 3/4 ply screwed with really hefty screws onto the front of it. Now at that point I thought, there's no point in doing anything with this, I can't, and I didn't come out with any tools or anything. I wasn't going to ring one of our responsive maintenance vans to come over and undo it at, I don't know, it was about 4 o'clock by then, I think, on a Friday afternoon. They wouldn't thank me for that. And then I remembered I had just bought earlier in the week, and it was still in the car in its wrappers, a brand new Makita set of drill drivers. Now, I'd never had an electric battery operated drill set before. I'd used manual, electric plug-in type drills before, and hand ones. So I'd never used the drill, and I'd never used the drill drivers before. But I thought, got to be worth a try. I'd bought a set of bits at the same time as well, so I'd got bits with me. So I went in the car, opened it up. Sure enough, there was charge in the batteries. So I went and I whizzed all the screws out. They were 4-6 inch screws, big things. Whipped all those out. Brought this sheet of 8x4 down. Job's a good one, no problems at all. Thinking how clever I was. Went in, did all I had to do. Photographs, measurements, all sorts of stuff like that. And then it came to packing up. And by this time it was about 4:30, 4:45. And I thought, 3/4 inch ply, 8x4, even then I wasn't that easily going to be able to lift that up 2 foot up the steps and put it up. It was up above the ground anyway. So I was kind of a bit stuck at that point, and I didn't quite know what to do. And then I had the great idea that if I stuck a screw in, stand the thing diagonally so that it's lozenge shaped, that puts the top right hand corner higher up than it would normally be on the ground. Put a screw in there, and then I could swing it into position across the doorway, and that way I can work with holding it with one hand and screw with the other, which was absolutely fine. Great thinking, wonderful. So I then held the piece of wood, plywood, put the screw in through the hole, and then whizzed it in with the drill driver. And at that point I discovered 2 things. Firstly, I'd never really used a drill driver much in anger before, and realised how powerful they were, to the extent that they've squashed my 2 fingers either side of the screw almost flat. certainly to the bone, and I said ouch, or words to that effect. Now the other thing I didn't realise is that I'd put the thing together wrong, and I just put a bit into the end of the drill driver, and when I'd gone ouch I'd sort of put the drill down and the bit fell out. So at this point I'm screwed to a wall in the middle of Loughborough. Nobody knows where I am. Now the other problem was I was 2 foot up in the air, up the steps, and I couldn't reach the ground where the drill bit had fallen. It's a nice sunny day. My jacket was in the car, which is about 7 feet away, with my phone. Nobody was expecting me until my wife may well have started to get a bit mithery about 7:30 perhaps. She certainly probably wouldn't have done anything much till 8, at which point she may well have rung my buddy and said, "Do you know where Peter is?" as he left. "Oh, I've been out all day," he would have said. "I don't know, I'll ring around." He would have rung round people. They would have all said, "I don't know, he went out this afternoon, he didn't say where." So whilst I wasn't in any particular mortal peril, I was actually still fixed to a wall in the middle of nowhere on a Friday bank holiday weekend, and without much prospect of getting out of there before probably about midnight. And it wasn't the best, most comfortable position to be in, because my fingers were quietly getting more and more poorly. The problem was that if I pulled on the bottom of this plywood, it squashed the top finger, and if I pulled on the top one, it squashed the bottom finger. So there was no way I could yank this lot apart without almost passing out with the pain and still not getting my fingers out. What I decided in the end was that if I could wedge the front of the nose of the drill driver in, I mean it wasn't this one, but it was very much like it, I managed to wedge that part below my finger, and then of course when I pulled with the top half of the board, it squashed that rather than my finger, and I was able to get my top finger out, and once I got that I was there. So after about a quarter of an hour, 20 minutes or so, I managed to get myself out. But it just shows how in that instant you can suddenly find yourself in a whole heap of trouble, and if you haven't done half of the things that I've just mentioned, you can be there either for a long time or forever. So it's just worth taking that little bit of thought about when you're working on your own, how vulnerable you are. So just think long and hard if you're doing jobs for people or you're off on your own in the middle of nowhere, or even if you're out in your shed in the garden, have that phone with you at all times. I now pretty much exclusively have mine with me in my pocket wherever I am, and then at least you stand a chance of being able to ring somebody. Hope it was of interest. Look forward to seeing you next week. We'll try and do something different. I'll see you then. Bye.